Deconstructing conclusions. Restatement of the thesis and main points, or solution and argument. This video is part 1 of the Deconstructing Conclusion series, a series intended to train you in the art of crafting the 4 elements of a conclusion for research writing. This video assumes that you have already watched our video on the thesis and the Deconstructing Introduction series, or are already familiar with the concepts described there. This video will teach you how to restate your thesis and main points. For more information on how to initially craft your thesis, please check out the Deconstructing Introduction series on our YouTube channel at WC_SE. So why should you restate your thesis and main points? Isn't such repetition jading to the reader? Well, remember that one of the major purposes of a conclusion is the global coherence of the essay. As it brings an essay to a close, the conclusion should tie up loose argumentative ends, clarify the central argument, and succinctly summarize the progression of the preceding argument. One significant way writers ensure global coherence is by restating their thesis and main points. In addition to improving the coherence of the essay, restating the thesis and main points near the beginning of the conclusion also helps to resituate and reintroduce your solution to the research problem. Since another goal of the conclusion is to make explicit how the writer's research and argument resolve a significant research problem, it is beneficial to clarify the thesis and main points before identifying how they press the reader towards a solution. Moreover, reiterating your preceding argument in the conclusion helps to tie your implications and applications to your thesis and ground them in your specific arguments. Besides these 3 reasons, this practice of restating your argument also offers a simple yet extremely practical function. It signals the transition from your core argument to your conclusion, helping orient readers to where they are in your essay. For at least these 4 reasons, restating your thesis and main points is a crucial element of an effective conclusion to a research essay. The significance of restatement does not guarantee that the way you restate your thesis and main points will keep your reader engaged. Most readers would naturally find it jading if the conclusion simply repeated the verbiage of the thesis and main points, almost word for word from the introduction and body paragraphs. Even though restatement is an important and effective way to signal and begin the conclusion paragraph, writers must consider how to frame the restatement without boring their readers with sentences copied and pasted from their introductions and body paragraphs. With this in mind, here are a few tips for framing your restatement of the thesis and main points. First, write the restatement of your thesis as a fuller and more complete account of your central argument. In the introduction, you likely tried to write a thesis that was clear and concise, as clear and concise as possible, knowing that your readers had not yet read your argument or been exposed to all of your claims and related ideas in the essay. However, by the time your readers reach the conclusion, they all have benefited from the cumulative effects of your argument, so they should be ready for a more complete and specific restatement of the thesis. Perhaps in the introduction you wrote that human creativity is not based in God's ontology as creator, but rather in his creative economy, since God is ontologically Father, Son, and Spirit, not creator. Your more complete and specific restated thesis might be, because God's Trinitarian ontology does not make his activity of creating necessary, God is not ontologically a creator. Instead, in his economy, he chose to freely and non-contingently to create. God's free creation, as the generative overflow of his relational Trinitarian nature, grounds our human creativity as acts that echo divine freedom and generativity through Godward acts of beauty and community. Note how this restatement is more expansive, requiring 2 sentences and including a more detailed claim. Second, write the restatement of your main points as a progressive argumentative summary. Unless your argument is most effectively represented in a list, avoid reducing your summary to a 1-sentence list with commas and a conjunction. Instead, curate your main points in such a way that you illustrate the logical relationships between your points. If point 3 depends on point 1 and 2, set up your summary to clarify and remind readers of that argumentative relationship. Third, consider writing the entire restatement in light of the research problem. Although most books on research writing and composition emphasize these first 2 tips, this 3rd tip is a stylistic suggestion I often find helpful. It may not always work, but I often find that it helps improve the coherence of my conclusion and eliminate what feels like choppiness between the early elements of the conclusion. Take, for instance, the example I mentioned earlier about grounding human creativity. If my research problem was that modern Christian aesthetics are often reliant on faulty theology, I could reintroduce the issue and frame my restatement with a simple clause before my restated thesis, something like, Although Christians often mislocate the biblical foundation for creativity, this simple subordinate clause links the restatement to the research problem and focuses the whole conclusion on the issue that my argument resolves. Consider trying this technique or developing your own to improve the style and coherence of your conclusion. Your restated thesis should be fuller, more complete, and more specific than the thesis in your introduction, so your restated thesis will naturally be longer than your initial thesis. This does not mean, however, that you should use more than a couple sentences. In general, restate your thesis in 1 to 2 sentences at or near the beginning of your conclusion. Then, restate your argument. In general, restate your main points in 1 to 3 sentences following the restated thesis. You do not need to restate every claim. Only restate the main claims that you argue in the essay. Think of what to include here as the major claims that warranted their own headings in your essay. Don't worry about summarizing all the claims related to every subheading. Your restatement of the thesis and main point should never exceed more than 30 or 40% of your conclusion. Use the rest of the conclusion to resolve the research problem and to identify implications and applications. Thank you for watching this video on restating the thesis and main points. To continue the series in sequence, look for the next video on the resolution of the research problem. Or if you have questions or would like help on one of these specific elements of the conclusion, please feel free to skip ahead to the corresponding video. Thank you, and keep writing.